Welcome to Historical. This is the place where we dive deep into dark, strange, and unexplained stories from real life and the internet. I'm your host, and today we're going to be talking about Maximillion, an 18-year-old boy that decided to create a website that sells nasty things like body parts, drugs, and any other things you can imagine of. This story is one of those situations that sounds unbelievable at first, but once you start going through it, everything begins to make sense in a very unsettling way. So stay with me because this one gets interesting very quickly. Let's get into it. So this German teenager is about to build one of the biggest online drug stores in Europe right from his bedroom, and honestly, when this story starts, he doesn't really look like the kind of person you'd expect to pull something like this off. His name is Maximillion, he's 18 years old, and he's living in Leipzig, Germany. Most of the time, he's just sitting in his room on his computer. He's not popular, he's not outgoing, and he doesn't really have much of a social life. From the outside, he looks like a normal teenager who spends too much time online. Nobody around him is thinking this kid is secretly about to run a massive drug operation. Back in 2013, Maximillion spends a lot of time browsing the internet, and eventually he comes across Silk Road. Now, Silk Road was already getting attention online at the time because it was basically an underground marketplace where people sold illegal things. Drugs, fake documents, weapons, stolen information, all kinds of stuff. The site existed on the dark web, which meant regular people usually couldn't stumble across it accidentally. You had to know how to access it. When Maximillion finds the site, he becomes fascinated by it, not because he wants to buy drugs for himself, but because he starts thinking about the business side of it. He's looking at the website and realizing people must be making unbelievable amounts of money from this thing. Every sale means profit, and the demand clearly exists because thousands of people are already using the platform. But while he's looking through Silk Road, he notices something else too. In his opinion, the website itself isn't even that impressive. The design feels outdated, the layout isn't great, and he starts convincing himself that he could probably make something better. That idea slowly grows in his head until eventually he decides he's actually going to try it. And this is where things really start going downhill for him. Instead of just staying some teenager browsing weird websites online, Maximillion decides he wants to create his own drug marketplace. Not just a copy of Silk Road, but something he thinks is cleaner, easier to use, and more professional. In his mind, if people already buy drugs online, then they'd probably use a better version if somebody built one. The first problem is obvious though, he needs drugs to sell. So he reaches out to a guy he knows who can supposedly get access to drugs in bulk. We don't really know much about this guy, but he becomes known as supplier. Maximillion contacts him and starts discussing buying products wholesale. It's kind of insane when you think about it because this is an 18-year-old trying to launch an international drug business from his bedroom, but apparently supplier agrees to work with him. Not long after that, packages containing cocaine and MDMA arrive for Maximillion. Now he officially has inventory, and once that happens, he fully commits to the idea. He creates a website and calls it Shiny Flakes. Honestly, the name sounds more like a cereal brand than a drug empire, but somehow it works. And what really separates Shiny Flakes from other illegal marketplaces at the time is how normal it looks. Maximillion designs the website almost like a regular online shopping platform. It has product photos, customer reviews, organized categories, ratings, FAQ sections, and simple navigation. He wants customers to feel comfortable using it. That's another weird part of this story. Maximillion approaches this whole thing almost like a tech startup instead of a criminal operation. He's thinking about user experience, customer satisfaction, website layout, shipping speed, and branding. He's basically trying to run Amazon, except he's selling narcotics. And one of the craziest details is that unlike Silk Road, which existed on the dark web, Shiny Flakes is actually accessible on the normal internet. People could literally find it through regular search engines. Imagine typing something illegal into Google and accidentally finding a functioning drug marketplace. That's basically what was happening. At first, business is pretty slow. Maximillion only gets maybe 1 or 2 orders per day, but even then he's handling everything himself. Every package gets prepared in his bedroom. Every order gets packed by him. Every shipment gets dropped off by him using the regular postal service. And somehow his mother has no idea what's happening. That part always surprises people because the operation grows so large, yet he's still living at home like a normal teenager. Apparently his mother respected his privacy and didn't spend much time in his room, which gave him enough freedom to keep everything hidden. Still, it's hard to imagine how much activity was happening in that house without anyone realizing something strange was going on. As months pass, the orders start increasing. 1 or 2 orders become 5 or 10, then even more. Customers begin requesting different products, so Maximillion expands the catalog. He adds crack, LSD, hash, prescription medications, and eventually stronger drugs too. The more products he adds, the more customers show up. And because customers are actually receiving their packages successfully, people begin recommending the site to others. Word spreads online, buyers leave reviews. New users trust the platform because older customers seem satisfied. It creates this cycle where the site keeps growing larger and larger. Soon Maximillion is processing dozens of orders every day, then hundreds, eventually thousands. And remember, this entire thing is still being operated out of a teenager's bedroom. At this point, Shiny Flakes is shipping drugs all over the world: Germany, Australia, China, Indonesia, Colombia, and plenty of other countries. Orders are constantly coming in, and Maximillion is making huge amounts of money from it. Authorities later estimated the website generated around 4 million euros worth of narcotics sales, with about 3 million euros in profit in roughly a year. That's an unbelievable amount of money for an 18-year-old. But what's interesting is he doesn't really act rich. Usually when people suddenly make millions from illegal businesses, they start buying expensive things. Fancy watches, luxury cars, designer clothes. But Maximillion keeps living almost exactly the same way. He stays quiet, keeps a low profile, and mostly just spends time online. That probably helped him avoid suspicion for a while because nobody around him saw obvious signs of wealth. If you passed him on the street, you probably wouldn't think twice about him. At the same time, though, running an operation this massive creates stress that probably never fully goes away. Even if he acted calm on the outside, he had to know that one mistake could destroy everything. Every package being mailed carried risk. Every customer created another chance for police to notice patterns. Every shipment moving through the postal system could potentially expose him. But once businesses like this start growing, people usually become overconfident. The success makes them believe they're smarter than everybody else. And honestly, for a while, Maximillion probably felt untouchable. One thing customers especially liked about Shiny Flakes was the presentation. Maximillion apparently cared a lot about customer service, which sounds ridiculous considering what he was selling, but it's true. He even started including gummy bears inside orders as a little bonus gift. As weird as that sounds, customers loved it. People started talking about the site positively online, leaving reviews, recommending it to friends, and praising how professional everything felt. That kind of reputation matters in illegal markets because buyers are constantly worried about scams. So once Shiny Flakes developed a reputation for actually delivering products reliably, the customer base exploded even more. Meanwhile, police across Germany start noticing something strange happening. Random packages containing drugs are appearing in different places. Sometimes packages get delivered to the wrong address. Sometimes intended recipients aren't home. In one case, a woman opens a package and discovers drugs inside, which obviously terrifies her. She immediately contacts police. At first, investigators don't fully understand what's going on, but then more cases appear. Similar packages are showing up in multiple locations across Germany. Different drugs, similar shipping methods, fake return addresses. Now police realize this isn't random. They begin investigating where the packages are being processed, and eventually, they notice many of them are connected to a dispatch center in Reifeld, around 20 minutes from where Maximillion lives. So authorities start monitoring local mailing stations. They're hoping to spot suspicious behavior or identify somebody mailing large quantities of packages. But Maximillion is careful enough to avoid using just one location. He rotates between different mailing centers, which makes surveillance difficult. This part of the investigation probably became frustrating for police because they clearly knew some kind of organized operation existed, but they couldn't directly connect it to a person yet. The fake return addresses led nowhere. The shipments were spread across different locations. The website itself also wasn't giving them easy answers. And meanwhile, Maximillion keeps operating normally. Imagine living with that kind of double life. During the day, he looks like a regular teenager still living with his mother, but behind closed doors, he's managing thousands of illegal transactions online. Every morning, he wakes up knowing police are probably searching for whoever runs Shiny Flakes, but at the same time, he keeps continuing anyway. Eventually, investigators catch a break. They intercept one of the packages and track down the intended recipient. Then they investigate that person and discover he had been visiting Shiny Flakes frequently. That gives police a direct connection between the drugs and the website. Now investigators focus heavily on identifying whoever owns Shiny Flakes. They contact the hosting provider hoping to get useful information, but initially they don't get much. And honestly, there was probably a period where Maximillion thought he might actually get away with everything. From his perspective, the business had survived for years already. Millions had been made, thousands of orders had been completed. Police still didn't know who he was. But illegal operations usually collapse eventually, because all it takes is one weak link. In this case, that weak link becomes supplier. By 2015, authorities are already monitoring supplier separately because of his own involvement in drug trafficking. Police observe suspicious packages connected to him and start tracking movements more carefully. Eventually, the investigation leads directly back to Maximillion. And just like that, everything falls apart. Police finally know where he lives, so they raid the apartment and arrest him. Imagine that moment for a second. One day you're sitting in your bedroom running this enormous operation that made millions of euros, and suddenly police are crashing through the door. All the secrecy, all the confidence, all the planning disappears instantly. And then there's the family side of it too. His mother suddenly discovers her teenage son was allegedly operating one of Europe's largest online drug stores from inside her home. In smaller communities or even regular neighborhoods, news like that spreads incredibly fast. People gossip immediately. Neighbors talk, friends talk, everybody suddenly looks at the family differently. That social pressure can completely change a person's life overnight. For Maximillion himself, the reality probably hit hard once he was arrested because the internet business fantasy was over. Now it became real courtrooms, real evidence, real prison sentences. He gets convicted and sentenced to 7 years in prison. And when people hear 7 years, sometimes they just think of the number without thinking about what that actually means, especially for someone that young. Your late teens and early 20s are usually the years where people figure out adulthood, careers, relationships, independence, all those normal life experiences. Instead, Maximillion spends those years connected to one massive criminal case. Then around 4.5 years later, in 2019, he gets released. At that point, you'd think maybe prison changed him. A lot of people assumed this was probably the end of the story. After all, he already lost years of his life, got arrested publicly, and became internationally known for operating Shiny Flakes. But apparently he couldn't stay away from it. Not long after getting out, Maximillion launches another online drug website called Candy Love. Different name, same basic idea. Once again, he goes back into online drug dealing. And honestly, that tells you a lot about how difficult it can be for people to completely separate themselves from something that once made them successful. Even after prison, he still returned to the same world. There's also the practical side of life after prison. Once somebody becomes publicly associated with a major criminal case, normal life gets complicated, jobs become harder to get, reputation follows you around, people recognize your name online, employers search your history, trust disappears. So even when someone gets released, the consequences continue long after prison ends. Still, going back into drug dealing after already being arrested once is an enormous risk because authorities are obviously paying closer attention now. Once police know somebody previously operated a huge narcotics marketplace, that person is probably never completely off investigators' radar again. And in 2023, authorities arrest Maximillion again. He gets found guilty again too, although his sentence later gets overturned while waiting for resentencing. But realistically, most people assume prison is still very likely in his future. And when you look back at the entire story, what makes it so strange is how ordinary everything looked on the surface. This wasn't some international cartel boss living in mansions with armed guards. This was a teenager sitting alone in his bedroom on a computer. That's what made Shiny Flakes so shocking to people. The scale became enormous, yet the operation itself stayed weirdly simple. A bedroom, a laptop, postal services, Bitcoin, and a teenager convinced he found a smarter way to run an illegal business. It also shows how the internet completely changed crime in ways people weren't prepared for at the time. Years earlier, building an international drug network would have required huge organizations, dangerous meetings, and physical street operations. But now one teenager could connect buyers and suppliers globally without even leaving his house most days. Of course, the internet also creates digital trails, and eventually those trails usually catch up with people. That's probably the biggest lesson from this entire story. For a while, Maximillion genuinely seemed untouchable. The business kept growing, customers kept coming, millions kept flowing in, and investigators struggled to identify him. But large operations create attention whether people want it or not. Once enough packages move through enough postal systems, eventually mistakes happen, wrong addresses happen, surveillance increases, connections form, investigators slowly piece things together. And once authorities identified supplier, the entire thing unraveled very quickly. What's also interesting is how young Maximillion was when this started. At 18, most people are still trying to figure out regular life. Meanwhile, he was managing international shipments, handling cryptocurrency payments, building websites, organizing inventory, and processing thousands of illegal orders. None of that excuses what he did, obviously, but it explains why the case became so famous. People couldn't believe somebody that young had built something that massive from inside a normal apartment bedroom. Even years later, people still talk about the Shiny Flakes case because it feels almost unreal. The gummy bears in the packages, the Amazon-style website design, the fact it appeared on the normal internet instead of the dark web, the teenager secretly making millions while living with his mom. Every part of the story sounds strange. But underneath all the bizarre details, it still ends the same way these stories usually end. Arrests, prison, investigations, and lives permanently changed by criminal decisions made years earlier. And the craziest part is that after everything that happened, after the raids, the prison sentence, the worldwide attention, and losing years of his life, Maximillion still went back and tried it again.